There's been a lot of euphoria around this gas find. I mean, it's about 175 k's off Mossel Bay. A lot of good things said about it, but I'm wondering whether or not whatever is down there is technically and economically recoverable.
Good evening, and thank you very much for inviting me. I understand the euphoria because I think it's a very positive development. Personally, I would not at this point describe it as a game changer because there's still a lot of work to be done. It's still early days. And I think the CEO or the president of Total, when he made the announcement, he mentioned that the next phase would be the need for them to do some 3D seismic tests.
Yeah.
And I think that will be followed by an evaluation and analysis of the data that will emerge from that, followed by an appraisal of the resource to prove whether there is a commercially recoverable resource reserve in place, and then will come the well development. So I think it's still early days. We cannot at this particular point attest. But I think South Africa has been looking for gas and oil for a very long time. And I think the fact that for the first time in a long while we have received this positive news justifies and explains why people are so excited about it. And I think it's fully understandable in that sense. But it's a positive development because it will also serve as a way of encouraging other companies that are investing substantial amounts of money in exploring for oil and gas in the South African coastal area, that at least there are some good prospects, and I think that in itself will boost confidence on many other investors.
Yeah, you're saying that it's certainly the positivity around it increases sentiment. It does give a positive sway to it. Would it mean cheaper inputs for South Africa? Because things like gas and oil in particular are set by international benchmarks, are they not? So what are the benefits from that perspective?
Look, the benefit is obviously there is an extra source to bring in foreign currency into the country, which is always positive, and that is if it is commercially recoverable. But I think on the other hand as well, as you mentioned very clearly, I mean, oil and gas, the price is set internationally, so there's not much you can do because that's determined at that level. But the fact that it's something from home gives that the sensibility that it's going to be cheaper. But I don't think it will. Ultimately, the price of oil will be what it is, established by international standards. And then the cost that we need to take into account is to actually extract the oil from there and to bring into the final destination, South Africa, which we know is also stipulated by regulation. So in that sense, I don't think it's going to make much of a difference.
And when the seismic studies are done and the technical studies are done, we'll get a clear indication of how much that cost will actually be. We have no idea at this stage.
At this stage, we do not have, because we do not know exactly what is the quantity, what is the volume of gas or oil that is available there. And I think that will determine everything else following from that in terms of also what investments are going to be needed to be made in order to exploit and extract that oil and to bring it to market.
Well, at the risk of only throwing barriers at you here, let me mention one more. I see the environmentalists are getting edgy over this as well. What's your take on that?
Look, it's always going to be a challenge, and I think that's a trade-off that we have to keep in mind, because in every activity, whether it's offshore, whether it's inland, that element will always come, particularly in this age of climate change and all of that. So it's understandable. But I think also what environmentalists need to understand is that no one will undertake such a project without doing a proper environmental impact assessment, and that will inform whether the project will go ahead or not. So, but also if you look in terms of oil spills internationally, we haven't had many incidents of that nature. And I think where we have had those incidents, like I think a few years back in the USA, those issues have been properly dealt with. So I think at this point, it's early days and everyone should just calm their nerves because I think the country will benefit if it does prove to be commercially viable.
Let's talk about the studies revealing that, look, there is something down there. It's a sizable quantity. The reserves are good. Talk to me about the spin-offs from that point.
Look, at this point, let me correct, it's no reserve. There's some prospect of gas. Total mentioned that there is about 1 billion or 500 million oil equivalent, which if you
how
look,
big is that comparatively?
It's not yet significant at this point. It's not yet significant, and I think it's early days for us to make any comments. But I think if you look at what South Africa consumes, just to give you an idea, South Africa consumes about 700,000 barrels a day. So it's almost 1 million barrels a day. So you can multiply that per year And what you find, 500 million barrels of oil equivalent, is not even sufficient for much. So I think it's early days. Total will still need to do further exploration work to discover new wells and look at all the potential. And ultimately, that's work that still needs to happen further downstream.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thanks very much indeed for coming
My pleasure.
in. John Rocha from the Southern African Regional Gas